Hi, my name is Camilla, and I remember the sound of her laughter echoing through my hallway before I remembered the pain of my shattered world. That Tuesday afternoon in October, when I turned my key in the lock of our Riverside home, I thought the worst surprise would be finding our cat had knocked over another plant. Instead, I discovered that 7 years of marriage, 2 children, and a lifetime of trust could crumble in the 30 seconds it took me to climb our oak staircase. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The conference in Denver was supposed to last 3 days. 3 days of pharmaceutical seminars, networking dinners, and hotel room service while my husband Dante stayed home with our twins, Lily and Mason. I'd kissed him goodbye that Monday morning, watching him flip pancakes in his favorite gray sweater, promising to bring back those artisanal chocolates he loved from the airport gift shop. He'd smiled that crooked smile I'd fallen for in college, the one that made his hazel eyes crinkle at the corners, and said, "Miss me, but not too much." If only I'd known those would be the last genuine words he'd ever speak to me. My flight back from Denver International got moved up due to a storm system rolling through Colorado. What should have been a Wednesday evening return became a Tuesday afternoon surprise. I remember texting Dante from the plane, "Coming home early, don't spoil the kids with too much screen time before I get there." But my phone died somewhere over Kansas, and I figured I'd just surprise everyone when I walked through our front door on Maple Street. The house looked normal from the outside. Dante's black Honda was in the driveway, next to my empty spot. The kids' bikes were scattered across our front lawn the way they always were, training wheels glinting in the autumn sun. Our neighbor Mrs. Patterson was watering her petunias, and she waved at me like it was any other Tuesday. Everything felt so perfectly ordinary, so beautifully routine, that I actually smiled as I pulled my suitcase from the trunk. I should have known something was wrong the moment I opened the front door. The silence was different. Not the comfortable quiet of a Tuesday afternoon, but something heavier, more deliberate. Our golden retriever, Copper, usually bounded toward me like I'd been gone for months. But today, he barely lifted his head from his bed by the fireplace. Even he seemed to sense that something had shifted in our little world on Maple Street. My heels clicked against the hardwood floors as I set down my luggage. The living room was immaculate. Too immaculate. The throw pillows on our sectional couch were perfectly arranged, not scattered the way they always were when the kids have been playing. The coffee table was clear of Mason's Lego creations and Lily's art supplies. It looked like someone had cleaned frantically, the way you do when you're expecting company you want to impress. "Dante," I called out, my voice echoing through our 2-story home. "Kids, I'm home early." Silence. But not complete silence. There was something else, something that made my skin prickle with unease. A sound from upstairs, so faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Laughter. Soft, feminine laughter that definitely wasn't coming from our 7-year-old daughter. My heart started beating faster, though I couldn't explain why. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Dante's sister Roxane had stopped by to help with the kids. Maybe one of the neighborhood moms was upstairs helping fold laundry while the children played at the park. Maybe I was just being paranoid because travel always made me anxious, and coming home to an unexpectedly quiet house was throwing me off balance. But as I stood at the bottom of our staircase, my hand gripping the banister we'd refinished together just last spring, every instinct I'd learned to trust over 32 years of life was screaming that something was wrong. The house smelled different, too. Not like the vanilla candles I always kept burning, but like something floral and unfamiliar. Perfume. Expensive perfume that I'd never worn in my life. I kicked off my heels, my bare feet silent against the stairs as I climbed toward whatever was waiting for me on the second floor. Each step felt like moving through thick water, time stretching and compressing in ways that didn't make sense. The laughter came again, clearer now, mixed with the voice I knew better than my own breathing. Dante's voice, low and intimate and saying words I thought were reserved only for me.
By the time I reached the top of the stairs, my hands were shaking. The door to our master bedroom, the room where we'd brought both babies home from the hospital, where we'd painted the walls sage green last summer, where we'd made love just 4 nights ago before my flight, was slightly ajar. Light spilled out into the hallway along with sounds that made my stomach lurch with recognition and disbelief.
This is the story of how I discovered that the man I'd built my entire adult life around, the father of my children, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world, had been living a double life in our own home. How 30 seconds of walking up a staircase destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the person sleeping next to me every night. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the most devastating betrayals happen in broad daylight, in your own bedroom, while your neighbor waters her flowers, and life goes on normally for everyone, except you. And this is the story of how I turned that betrayal into the greatest victory of my life. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. Let me take you back to understand how perfect I thought our life was, how completely I trusted the man who was about to shatter everything I believed in. Dante and I met at Northwestern University during our junior year. I was studying business marketing. He was pre-med with dreams of becoming a pediatrician. We were both ambitious, both hardworking, both building towards something bigger than ourselves. Our first date was at a little coffee shop called Brewster's Corner near campus, where he spent 3 hours telling me about his plans to open a family practice in a small town, somewhere he could really make a difference in kids' lives. I fell in love with his passion before I fell in love with his smile. After graduation, we moved to Willowbrook, a charming suburb about 40 minutes outside Chicago. Dante got accepted into the pediatric residency program at Riverside Children's Hospital, and I landed a marketing coordinator position at Fletcher & Associates, a mid-sized firm that specialized in healthcare communications. It felt like destiny. We were both building careers in healthcare, supporting each other's dreams, creating the foundation for the life we'd always talked about. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony at Willowbrook Community Church. Nothing fancy, just our families and closest friends, with sunflowers and mason jars because we were still paying off student loans and saving for a house. Dante's vows still make me smile when I think about them. Camila, you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone as incredible as you. I promise to choose you every day, in the big moments and especially in the small ones. For 7 years, I thought he kept that promise. We bought our house on Maple Street when I was pregnant with the twins. It was a 1950s colonial that needed work, but it had good bones and a big backyard where we could imagine our children playing. Dante spent weekends refinishing hardwood floors while I painted nurseries, both of us dreaming out loud about birthday parties and Christmas mornings and all the memories we'd make in those rooms. When Lily and Mason were born, 2 minutes apart with Lily leading the way like she still does, Dante cried harder than I did. He held each baby like they were made of spun glass, whispering promises about the father he was going to be, the life he was going to give them. Watching him with our newborns, I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. Our routine was beautiful in its simplicity. Dante worked 4 days a week at the clinic, giving him long weekends with the family. I handled most of the business travel for Fletcher & Associates, but never more than 3 days at a time, never more than twice a month. We tag-teamed everything else: school pickup, soccer practice, grocery runs, bedtime stories. Sunday mornings were sacred. Pancakes, cartoons, and family walks around Willowbrook Park, with Copper trotting beside us. I trusted Dante completely, not just with fidelity, but with everything. He had my banking passwords, my work calendar, access to every corner of my life. When Fletcher & Associates offered me the promotion to senior marketing director last year, the one that came with better pay but more travel, Dante was the one who encouraged me to take it. "You've worked too hard to pass this up, Cam," he said, pulling me close in our kitchen while the kids giggled over breakfast. "I've got things handled here. This is your time to shine." I believed him. When I traveled to client conferences in Atlanta, Phoenix, Denver, I never worried about what was happening at home.
Danton sent me photos of the kids' homework, videos of soccer goals, updates about everything from Copper's vet visit to the progress on our kitchen renovation. He was present, engaged, seemingly devoted to our life together. The night before I left for Denver, we made love with a tenderness that felt like a promise. Afterward, lying in his arms in our sage green bedroom, I told him about the new pharmaceutical account I was hoping to land, how it could set us up to finally renovate the upstairs bathroom, and maybe take that family trip to Disney World we'd been talking about for months.
"I'm so proud of you," he whispered into my hair. "You're incredible, you know that? Our kids are so lucky to have you as a mom." I fell asleep feeling grateful for the life we'd built, secure in the love we shared, completely unaware that the man holding me was living a double life in the very bed where I felt safest in the world. That was Monday night. On Tuesday afternoon, I would discover that every kiss goodbye, every miss you text, every loving word had been a lie designed to keep me exactly where he wanted me, trusting, traveling, and completely oblivious to what he was doing the moment I walked out our front door. The Denver Pharmaceutical Marketing Summit was supposed to be my breakthrough moment. 3 days of networking with industry leaders, presenting our new campaign strategies, and hopefully landing the Meridian Health account that could change everything for Fletcher & Associates. I'd been preparing for months, rehearsing my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep, researching every attendee who might have decision-making power. The conference was being held at the Grand Hyatt downtown, one of those gleaming towers that make you feel important just walking through the lobby. My room on the 23rd floor had a view of the Rocky Mountains that took my breath away when I first pulled back the curtains. I remember thinking how much Dante would love this view. Maybe we could plan a family ski trip here next winter when the kids were a little older. Tuesday morning started perfectly. My presentation on integrated healthcare marketing went flawlessly. The kind of performance where you can feel the room's energy shift, where you know you've not just delivered information, but actually changed minds. 3 different companies approached me afterward, including Rebecca Chen from Meridian Health, who suggested we schedule a follow-up call for the following week. I was riding high, texting updates to Dante between sessions, practically floating through the networking lunch. "Absolutely crushing it here," I texted him around noon. "Think might have landed the Meridian account. Kids being good for you?" His response came back within minutes. "So proud of you, superstar. Kids are perfect angels. Took them to Riverside Park this morning. Now they're having quiet time. You focus on conquering Denver. We've got everything handled here. Love you." Even now, knowing what I know, I can still feel the warmth that text gave me, the security of knowing my family was safe and happy while I pursued our dreams, the confidence that came from having a partner who genuinely celebrated my successes instead of feeling threatened by them. The afternoon sessions went equally well. I connected with marketing directors from 3 major hospital systems, exchanged cards with a pharmaceutical VP who expressed serious interest in our services, and even got invited to an exclusive dinner that evening with some of the biggest names in healthcare marketing. By 4 o'clock, I was thinking this might be the most successful business trip of my career. That's when my phone started buzzing with weather alerts. A massive storm system was moving across Colorado faster than meteorologists had predicted. Lightning, hail, winds strong enough to ground aircraft. The conference organizers made an announcement during the final session. All Wednesday activities were being moved to Thursday, and attendees were strongly advised to check with airlines about potential flight changes. I called United immediately. The customer service representative, a patient woman named Janet, explained that my Wednesday evening flight to Chicago had been automatically moved to Thursday afternoon, but they'd had a last-minute cancellation on Tuesday evening's 6:15 p.m. departure if I was interested in flying standby. "The storm's supposed to hit around 10 tonight," Janet explained. "If you can get to the airport by 5:30, you've got a good chance of making it out before everything gets grounded." I looked around the conference room where the final session was just beginning. Staying would mean another night in Denver, another networking dinner, possibly more connections that could benefit my career. But more than that, something inside me was pulling toward home. Call it intuition or just missing my family, but I wanted to be back on Maple Street. I wanted to surprise the kids, to see their faces light up when I walked through the front door unexpectedly. I wanted to fall asleep next to Dante,
to share all my good news in person instead of through phone calls and text messages. "Book it," I told Janet. "I'll take the standby seat." The rush to pack and get to Denver International was exhilarating. I threw everything into my suitcase haphazardly, called an Uber, and made it to the airport with 20 minutes to spare. The gate agent, a young man named David with kind eyes, called my name for the last available seat just as they were about to close the boarding door. "You're lucky lady," he said, handing me my boarding pass. "This is the last flight out before the storm hits." Lucky. If only I'd known how unlucky this stroke of good fortune would prove to be.
The flight was turbulent but uneventful. I spent most of the time working on my follow-up strategy for the contacts I'd made, drafting emails to send the next morning, planning how to leverage this trip into real business growth. I was excited to tell Dante about Rebecca Chen's interest in Meridian Health, about the dinner invitation I'd had to turn down, about how well everything had gone. I tried calling him during my layover in Kansas City, but it went straight to voicemail. No big deal. Tuesday evenings were often busy with the kids' homework and dinner cleanup. I sent a text instead. "Coming home tonight. Flight lands at 9:40. Don't wait up if you're tired. I'll just surprise everyone in the morning." The message showed as delivered, but he never responded. Again, not unusual. Dante wasn't much of a phone person, especially when he was in dad mode with Lily and Mason. What I didn't know was that my phone had been losing signal intermittently throughout the flight. What I didn't realize was that the text I thought I'd sent never actually went through. What I couldn't have imagined was that Dante had no idea I was coming home early, no warning that his carefully constructed Tuesday evening plans were about to be shattered by my unexpected return. The plane touched down at O'Hare right on schedule. I remember feeling grateful for the smooth landing, for avoiding the Denver storm, for the chance to wake up in my own bed instead of that hotel room. I collected my luggage quickly, caught a cab to Willowbrook, and watched the familiar suburbs roll past the windows as we drove toward Maple Street. The house looked so peaceful when the taxi pulled into our driveway. Warm light glowing from the upstairs windows, Dante's car in its usual spot, everything exactly as it should be. I paid the driver, wheeled my suitcase up our front walkway, and slipped my key into the lock of what I still believed was the safest place in my world. If I could go back to that moment, standing on my own front porch with my key in my hand, would I choose to turn around? Would I choose to go back to the airport, catch a red-eye back to Denver, preserve the illusion of my perfect marriage for just a little while longer? I used to think I would. But now I know the truth. Sometimes the most devastating moments of your life are also the most necessary ones. Sometimes you have to walk through your own front door to discover who you really married. The sound that hit me first wasn't laughter anymore. It was music. Soft jazz playing from her bedroom stereo. The same playlist Dante used to put on during our romantic evenings when we were first married. The irony of it made my stomach clench. He was using our music, our atmosphere, our secret space for whatever was happening behind that partially open door. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my bare feet rooted to the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last spring. Every rational part of my brain was screaming explanations that would make this normal, innocent, explainable. Maybe he was just relaxing, listening to music while folding laundry. Maybe he had a headache and was lying down. Maybe the voices I was hearing were coming from a movie or TV show. But the perfume smell was stronger now, expensive and cloying, nothing like the light vanilla scent I always wore. And beneath the jazz music, I could hear something that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. The unmistakable sound of fabric rustling, of movement on our bed, of whispered words too intimate and familiar for a television screen. "You're incredible," I heard Dante say, his voice thick with the same desire I thought was reserved only for me. A woman's voice responded, breathy and satisfied. I couldn't concentrate at work knowing I'd be here tonight. God, I've missed this. The words hit me like physical blows. Work. She knew him from work. This wasn't some random encounter, some moment of weakness with a stranger. This was someone from his world, someone who'd been planning this, anticipating this, missing this, which meant it had happened before.
My legs almost gave out as the full implications crashed over me. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an affair, a relationship. Someone else who knew our Tuesday routine, who knew when I traveled, who felt comfortable enough in my home to speak with such familiarity about missing intimacy with my husband. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so loudly I sure that hear it downstairs. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk back down those stairs, get in my car and drive anywhere else. Preserve the illusion just a little while longer. Pretend this wasn't happening, wasn't real. But I needed to know. I needed to see who she was, how long this had been going on, what my marriage actually was versus what I'd believed it to be. Moving like a ghost, I crept closer to the bedroom door. Through the gap, I could see a slice of our room, the sage green walls we'd painted together, the antique dresser that had been my grandmother's, the reading chair where I nursed both babies during those long midnight feedings.
And I could see the foot of our bed. Our cream-colored duvet was tangled and pushed aside. 2 pairs of legs were intertwined on top of the sheets. Dante's familiar calves and ankles, and a woman's long, tanned legs that definitely didn't belong to me. Her toenails were painted crimson red, and she was wearing a delicate gold anklet that caught the lamplight. "The kids don't suspect anything, do they?" the woman asked, and her casual mention of Lily and Mason made bile rise in my throat. "Of course not," Dante replied, his voice carrying that confident tone he used when explaining medical procedures to worried parents. "They think Aunt Jasmine is just Daddy's friend from the hospital who comes over sometimes to help with homework." Aunt Jasmine. The name hit me like a slap. Not only did this woman exist in our home regularly enough that our 7-year-old children knew her name, but she'd been positioned as a family friend, a helper, someone safe and trustworthy who assisted with homework while Mommy was away on business trips. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound as the full scope of this betrayal revealed itself. This wasn't just adultery. This was systematic deception involving our children, manipulation of our family structure, corruption of our home. While I was in Denver, working to build our financial security, Dante was bringing his mistress into our bedroom and introducing her to our children as someone who cared about their education. "They adore you," Dante continued, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Mason asked yesterday if Aunt Jasmine could come to his soccer game this weekend." Her laugh was musical, pleased. "I'd love that. It's getting easier, isn't it? Having us." "So much easier," Dante agreed, "especially with Camila traveling more now. The promotion was the best thing that could have happened to us." The room tilted around me. My promotion, the career advancement I thought we'd celebrated together, that he'd encouraged me to pursue, had been orchestrated to facilitate his affair. He'd pushed me to take a job that required more travel, not because he believed in my potential, but because my absence created opportunities for him to build a relationship with another woman. In our home, in our bed, with our children downstairs calling her Aunt Jasmine and asking her to soccer games. "She has no idea, does she?" Jasmine asked, and there was something almost pitying in her tone that made me want to scream. "None at all," Dante said with the same confidence he'd once used to reassure me about everything, from our mortgage payments to the kids' minor injuries. "Poor thing," Jasmine said, though she didn't sound particularly sorry. "She's missing out on so much. The way you are with the kids, how incredible you are as a father and a lover. If she really knew you, she'd never leave town." "But then we wouldn't have this," Dante replied, and I could hear the sound of him moving closer to her on the bed. Our bed, where I'd slept next to him just 5 nights ago, believing I was the luckiest woman alive. I couldn't listen anymore, couldn't watch anymore, couldn't stand in that hallway for another second pretending this wasn't happening, that my marriage wasn't a lie, that the man I'd built my entire adult life around wasn't casually discussing how easy it was to deceive me with a woman who was now apparently a regular presence in our children's lives. But as I started to back away from the door, to retreat down the stairs and process this nightmare somewhere else, I heard something that stopped me cold.
"Have you thought about what we discussed?" Jaslyn asked, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "About making this permanent?" There was a pause that felt like an eternity. "I have," Dante said finally. "The lawyer I consulted thinks I have a good case for primary custody, given how much Camila travels. And with the house in both of our names, I could probably keep it. The kids shouldn't have to leave their home just because Mommy chose her career over her family." The words hit me like a physical attack. Not only was my husband having an affair, not only was he involving our children in his deception, but he was actively planning to divorce me, take custody of Lillian Mason, and keep our house while painting me as the negligent mother who prioritized work over family. Standing there in that hallway, listening to them plan the destruction of my life with the same casual intimacy they'd probably used to plan their afternoon together, I felt something inside me crack and then crystallize into something harder than I'd ever known I could become. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. And they had no idea they just recruited their most dangerous opponent.
I don't remember backing away from that bedroom door. I don't remember walking down the stairs or leaving the house. The next thing I knew with any clarity, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of Millfield Elementary School, 3 blocks from home, shaking so violently that my teeth were chattering despite the October warmth. The dashboard clock read 10:47 p.m. I had been sitting there for over an hour, staring at the darkened playground where my children spent their recesses, trying to process what I'd heard, what I'd seen, what it all meant for the life I'd thought I was living. My phone had been buzzing intermittently with text messages. I finally looked at the screen with trembling fingers. Dante. "Hey, babe. Hope Denver went well today. Kids are asleep. I'm heading to bed early. Love you." Sent at 9:23 p.m., 20 minutes before I'd walked through our front door and discovered him in our bed with another woman. 20 minutes before I learned that my marriage was a carefully constructed lie designed to give him maximum freedom while keeping me completely ignorant. The casualness of that text message, the effortless way he could switch from planning my divorce with his mistress to sending me loving goodnight messages, made me physically ill. I opened the car door just in time to vomit into the empty parking lot, my body rejecting everything I'd learned in the span of an hour. When the nausea passed, I sat back in the driver's seat and really looked at my phone for the first time. Not just Dante's message, but everything else that painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see clearly. The work calendar on his phone that I had access to, I'd never thought to question it, but now I scrolled back through weeks of entries. Late consultation with Dr. Martinez, staff meeting with pediatrics team, continuing education seminar, all scheduled on days when I was traveling, all conveniently timed to end around dinner time when he'd be home with the kids. But Dr. Martinez was 73 years old and had retired 6 months ago. The pediatric staff meetings happened on Wednesdays, not Tuesdays. And the continuing education seminars, I'd never seen any certificates, any materials, any evidence that they existed beyond calendar entries designed to account for missing time. I opened our banking app with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Joint checking account, joint savings, everything transparent and shared the way we'd always handled our finances. Except now, I was looking at the transactions with different eyes, seeing patterns I'd been too trusting to notice. Restaurant charges on days I was out of town, not casual lunch places, but expensive dinner spots. Valeria's, the intimate Italian place downtown where we'd celebrated our last anniversary. Sunset Terrace, the rooftop bar that required reservations weeks in advance. Floral arrangements from Pemberton's high-end flower shop that charged $60 for what grocery stores sold for $15. All charged to our joint account. All funded by money I'd helped earn traveling for work while he used our shared resources to romance another woman in places that should have been special to us. The gift purchases were even more devastating.
A jewelry charge from Hartman's Fine Jewelry for $347, dated 3 weeks ago when I was in Phoenix. I'd never received any jewelry from Hartman's. A charge from Lavender and Lace, an expensive lingerie boutique for $178. I'd never shopped at Lavender and Lace, had never owned anything that cost $178 from there. He was buying gifts for her with our money. Intimate gifts, romantic gifts, anniversary-level tokens of affection while sending me generic "miss you" texts and promising to pick up milk on his way home from work. The phone records were even worse. Our family plan showed call logs, text volumes, data usage for all lines. Dante's phone showed hundreds of calls to a number I didn't recognize. Long calls, sometimes lasting over an hour, often late at night after I'd gone to bed during my nights at home. The data usage on his phone had tripled in the past 6 months, probably from photo sharing, video calls, all the intimate digital communication that builds a relationship while I slept next to him completely unaware. I reverse searched the number he'd been calling. Social media profiles came up immediately. Jasmine Torres, 28 years old, pediatric nurse at Riverside Children's Hospital. Her Instagram was public, and scrolling through it was like watching the documentation of my marriage's destruction in real time. Photos from restaurants I recognized from our bank statements. Wine glasses raised to toasts at Valeria's. Sunset shots from the rooftop at Sunset Terrace. She was wearing jewelry I'd paid for without knowing it. Lingerie I'd funded without realizing it. And in several recent photos, she was wearing what looked like a man's button-down shirt. Casual morning after shots that made my stomach clench with recognition. It was Dante's blue Oxford shirt, the one I'd given him for Father's Day 2 years ago, with "World's Best Dad" embroidered discreetly near the left cuff. She was wearing my gift to my husband while posting intimate photos that documented their relationship's progression. But the photos that destroyed me weren't the romantic dinner shots or the jewelry displays. They were the photos with my children.
Jasmine at Mason's Little League game, cheering from the bleachers. Jasmine helping Lily with what looked like a science project. Both of them grinning at the camera in our kitchen. Jasmine reading bedtime stories, building Lego towers, pushing swings at Riverside Park. All captioned with hearts and comments about "my favorite little humans" and "blessed to be part of this beautiful family." My children, my babies, who I'd carried and delivered and nursed and raised, were being integrated into another woman's social media narrative about her relationship with their father. They were being used as props in documenting an affair that was systematically destroying my mother's life. The worst part wasn't even the evidence of the physical relationship. It was seeing how naturally my children had accepted her presence, how comfortable they looked with this woman who was actively participating in plans to take my mother's place permanently. In the photos, they looked happy, relaxed, like they enjoyed her company, trusted her completely, maybe even preferred some aspects of the time they spent with Aunt Jasmine to the rushed mornings and tired evenings they sometimes had with me. I thought about all the business trips I'd taken in the past 6 months, all the times I'd called home to check in and heard laughter in the background. "Oh, that's just Jasmine," Dante would say. "She stopped by to help with homework." And I'd felt grateful that he had support, that the kids had another positive adult in their lives, that my husband was thoughtful enough to arrange educational help while I was away working for our family's future. Sitting in that school parking lot, looking at months of evidence that my husband had been systematically replacing me in every aspect of our family life, I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was an audition. Jasmine hadn't been brought into our home as his mistress. She'd been brought in as my replacement. The homework help, the soccer games, the bedtime stories weren't just cover for their relationship. They were practice runs for the permanent family structure they were planning to create after discarding me. While I'd been in hotel rooms calling to say goodnight to my children, another woman had been in my kitchen making their snacks. While I'd been working late to secure our future, she'd been stealing it from me, one family dinner, one bedtime story, one Little League game at a time. The cruelest irony was that I'd been grateful for her presence in our lives. Every time Dante mentioned that Jasmine had helped with something, I'd felt relief that he wasn't handling everything alone, that the children had a positive female influence when I couldn't be there. I'd actually been thankful that another woman was making my husband's life easier and my children happier. I'd been grateful to the woman who was planning to take my place. By midnight, I'd scrolled through 6 months of evidence that my marriage was over, my family was being systematically restructured without my knowledge, and my children were being prepared for a life where I was the part-time parent who'd chosen career over family, the woman who was too busy traveling to notice that someone else was building the intimate daily relationships that actually matter. And tomorrow morning, I'd have to wake up and decide whether to confront this reality or pretend I'd never discovered it, whether to fight for a marriage that might already be legally over, or figure out how to protect myself and my children from people who'd proven capable of deception I'd never imagined possible. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go home tonight. I couldn't lie down in that bed where my husband had been planning my replacement, couldn't kiss my children goodnight knowing they'd been taught to love the woman who was actively working to remove me from their lives. So I drove to the Fairfield Inn on Route 41 and checked into a room under my maiden name and spent the longest night of my life learning exactly how much betrayal one person could survive in a single evening. I didn't sleep that night in the Fairfield Inn. Instead, I sat by the window watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold, wondering how something so beautiful could exist in a world where everything I'd believed in crumbled in the span of a few hours. Around 6 a.m., I finally dozed off in the uncomfortable chair, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline to a reality I no longer understood. The buzzing woke me at 7:43 a.m. Dante's name flashed on the screen, along with a photo of him holding both kids on his shoulders at the zoo last summer. Looking at that image, the man I'd thought was devoted to our family, my children's faces bright with joy and trust, made my chest tighten with a grief so profound I could barely breathe. "Good morning, beautiful." His voice was warm, familiar, completely normal. "How was your extra day in Denver? I missed you last night."
For a moment, I couldn't speak. The casual way he could lie, the effortless transition from planning my divorce with his mistress to playing the loving husband over breakfast, it was a level of duplicity that made me question everything I'd ever known about human nature. "Fine," I managed, my voice hoarse from a night of no sleep and too many tears. "Conference went well." "That's my superstar," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The same voice that had been whispering intimate things to another woman in our bed 12 hours ago. "Kids are asking when you're coming home. Lily made you a welcome home card, and Mason drew a picture of the whole family, even included Copper with his tongue hanging out." The mention of my children's innocent love, their excitement for my return while knowing that another woman had been positioning herself as their preferred maternal figure, made me press my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing into the phone. "I'll be home this afternoon," I said, though I had no idea how I was going to walk through that front door and pretend everything was normal. "Perfect. I'm taking the day off. Thought we could spend some family time together. Maybe take the kids to Riverside Park, grab dinner at that new pizza place they've been talking about. Just the four of us." Just the four of us. The phrase that should have filled me with warmth instead made me think about how many times recently it hadn't been just the four of us. How many times Jasmine had been the fifth person at our family dinners, the extra adult supervising homework, the woman my children were learning to love and depend on. "That sounds nice," I lied because I didn't know what else to say. "Oh, and Cam, I love you.
I know I don't say it enough, but you're incredible. Everything you do for this family, all the traveling and hard work, I see it, I appreciate it, and I love you more every day." The cruelty of those words, spoken with such apparent sincerity while he was actively planning to destroy our marriage, made me hang up without saying goodbye. I threw the phone across the hotel room and spent 10 minutes crying so hard I thought I might be sick again. The crying wasn't going to solve anything. And sitting in this hotel room pretending last night hadn't happened wasn't going to protect my children or save what could be saved of my life. I needed to go home. I needed to see my kids, to hold them, to figure out how much they really knew and how deeply Jasmine's influence had taken root. I needed to understand what I was fighting for and what might already be lost. The drive back to Maple Street felt like moving through a dream sequence. Everything looked exactly the same as it had yesterday afternoon. Tree-lined streets of Willowbrook, Mrs. Patterson's perfectly manicured lawn, the elementary school playground where I'd spent last night having my breakdown. But I felt like a different person, navigating a world that no longer made sense. Dante's car was gone from the driveway when I pulled up, probably taking the kids to school, maintaining the normal Wednesday routine, while I'd spent the night in a hotel, processing the destruction of everything we'd built together. The normality of it, the way life just continued moving forward despite the earthquake that had shattered my understanding of reality, felt surreal. I let myself into the house with hands that were surprisingly steady. The living room looked exactly as it had yesterday afternoon. Throw pillows perfectly arranged, coffee table clear, everything pristine in a way that now made perfect sense. Of course he'd cleaned obsessively. Of course every trace of Jasmine's presence had been erased before I was supposed to return. But I knew what to look for now. In the kitchen, I found evidence I'd missed before. 2 coffee cups in the dishwasher, still damp from being rinsed. Dante only drank coffee in the morning, and I was in Denver. The expensive French roast we only bought for special occasions was open, half empty. A bottle of wine was missing from our rack, the 2018 Cabernet we were saving for our anniversary next month. Upstairs, our bedroom looked normal at first glance. The bed was made with military precision, fresh sheets that smelled like detergent and fabric softener. But the throw pillows were arranged differently than I would have done it, and the reading chair I always kept angled toward the window had been moved closer to the bed. In our master bathroom, I found a long, dark hair wrapped around the drain of the shower. My hair was shoulder length and auburn. This hair was nearly black and much longer, caught in the drain cover like evidence of intimacy that happened in the space where I got ready for work every morning. In the guest bathroom, the one we told the kids to use when friends came over, had been recently cleaned with bleach. The smell was still faint but unmistakable, the kind of thorough sanitizing you do when you want to eliminate every trace of DNA evidence. But it was in our master bedroom closet that I found the thing that changed everything. Hidden behind my winter coats, pushed far back against the wall where I'd never have reason to look, was a small jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside was a diamond engagement ring. Not huge, but clearly expensive, clearly chosen with care and love. The inscription inside the band read, JT, forever starts now, DR. JT, Jasmine Torres, DR, Dante Rodriguez. My husband had bought an engagement ring for another woman. Not just any ring, but a carefully selected symbol of commitment inscribed with a promise of forever hidden in our shared closet while he continued to sleep next to me and plan family pizza dinners. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This wasn't even just a plan to divorce me and pursue a relationship with someone else. This was a proposal, a commitment, a promise of marriage to another woman while he was still married to me, still sharing my bed, still telling me he loved me every morning over coffee. I was holding the ring, trying to process this new level of betrayal when I heard the front door open downstairs. "Mommy!" Lily's voice rang through the house, bright with genuine excitement. "Mommy's home! Mason, Mommy's home!" The sound of my children's joy, their innocent happiness at my return, while I stood in my closet holding evidence that their father was planning to marry someone else, created a cognitive dissonance so profound I thought I might collapse. "Camila," Dante called from downstairs. "Babe, are you here? Your car's in the driveway." Footsteps on the stairs, getting closer. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide what to do with the ring in my hand, what to say about being home when I was supposed to be in Denver until tonight, how to face my husband and children knowing what I now knew. "Mason!" My son's voice was getting closer, probably taking the stairs 2 at a time the way he always did when he was excited. I slipped the ring box into my jacket pocket and stepped out of the closet just as my 7-year-old son launched himself into my arms with the kind of pure, unconditional love that reminded me exactly what I was fighting for. "I missed you so much," he said, his small arms tight around my neck. "Daddy said you might be home late, but here you are." Behind him, Lily appeared in the doorway with a piece of construction paper covered in glitter and crayon hearts. "I made this for you, Mommy." It says welcome home, but I spelled welcome wrong and had to fix it with more glitter. And behind her, Dante appeared with the same warm smile he'd worn every day of our marriage, the same loving expression that had never given me a single reason to doubt his faithfulness or commitment. The ring box felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my pocket as I kissed my children and prepared to pretend, for their sake, that I had no idea their father was already engaged to someone else. The family pizza dinner at Antonio's was torture. Sitting across from Dante, watching him help Mason cut his slice and compliment Lily on her improved table manners, knowing that an engagement ring for another woman was hidden in our bedroom closet required acting skills I didn't know I possessed. Every smile felt like broken glass. Every pass the Parmesan like swallowing poison. But something had shifted in me during those horrible hours at the hotel. The initial devastation was crystallizing into something colder, more focused. If Dante could perform perfect husband and father while systematically dismantling our marriage, then I could perform perfect wife while gathering the evidence I'd need to protect myself and my children. "You're quiet tonight," Dante observed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His wedding ring caught the restaurant light, a symbol that apparently meant nothing to him, but everything to the woman who didn't yet know her husband was already engaged to someone else. "Just tired from the trip," I replied, forcing myself not to pull away from his touch. Denver was intense. "Well, you're home now," he said, bringing my hand to his lips to kiss my knuckles with the same tenderness he'd shown since our college days. We missed our superstar. The children beamed at this display of parental affection, completely unaware that they were watching a masterclass in deception from their father. Lily actually said, "I love when Daddy kisses Mommy's hand like that," which made Dante's smile grow even warmer while my stomach churned with revulsion. After dinner, during the kids' bath time routine, I excused myself to catch up on work emails and locked myself in our home office. The engagement ring was still in my jacket pocket, but I needed more than one piece of evidence to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Dante's home computer was in the office, an older Dell he used for managing our household finances and the kids' school correspondence. I'd never had reason to snoop before. We'd always shared passwords, maintained joint accounts, operated with complete transparency. But transparency, I now understood, had entirely been one-sided.
His email was still logged in, probably because he'd never imagined I'd have reason to look. The first thing I found was a folder labeled JT, buried deep in his directory structure. Inside were months of correspondence that documented not just an affair, but a carefully planned future that had no place for me. "My darling Jay," read one email from 3 weeks ago. "The lawyer confirmed that Illinois is an equitable distribution state, which means the House division will be based on contribution and need rather than just splitting everything 50-50. Since I've been the primary childcare provider and Camila travels so much for work, he's confident we can argue that the children's stability requires them staying in the family home with me. That means staying with us." Us. He'd already progressed to thinking of himself and Jasmine as a unit, a family structure that would inherit the life I'd helped build, while I was relegated to weekend visits and child support payments. Another email,
dated just 5 days ago. "The ring is perfect, mi amor. I've been carrying it with me all week, imagining the moment I can finally put it on your finger officially. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. Soon you'll be Mrs. Rodriguez, and the kids will have the mother they deserve, one who puts family first instead of chasing corporate success in other cities." The casual cruelty of that statement, the way he'd rewritten our entire relationship to paint my career dedication as maternal failure, made me physically ill. But I forced myself to keep reading, to document every piece of evidence that might protect me and my children. There were hotel reservations for romantic weekends I'd never taken, restaurant bookings for anniversaries I'd never celebrated, vacation planning for trips that didn't include me. A whole parallel life documented in digital detail, funded by our joint accounts and scheduled around my business travel. The most damaging emails were the ones discussing the children. "Lily asked today why you don't live with us all the time," Jasmine had written. "I told her that sometimes adults have to live in different places until they can be together forever. She said she hopes forever comes soon because she likes having a mama who helps with homework and doesn't have to go to work trips all the time." My 7-year-old daughter was already emotionally preparing for Jasmine to become her full-time mother. The woman who'd been systematically inserted into our family structure had successfully positioned herself not just as Dante's romantic partner, but as a superior maternal figure who would be more present, more available, more dedicated to the children than their actual mother. But the investigation was just beginning. I needed to understand the financial implications, the legal vulnerabilities, the full extent of how long this had been planned and how far they'd already progressed. Our joint bank statements revealed systematic financial infidelity that went far beyond dinner dates and jewelry. Dante had opened a separate savings account, one I'd never known existed, and had been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts for months. Small amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts, but they added up to over $15,000 in what appeared to be preparation for divorce proceedings. He'd also been consulting with Davidson and Associates, one of the most aggressive family law firms in the county. The legal consultation emails I found showed that he'd been planning this for at least 4 months, gathering documentation of my travel schedule, my work hours, even photographs of me missing school events due to business trips. Client believes he can demonstrate that spouse prioritizes career advancement over family responsibilities. Extensive travel records and documented childcare arrangements support primary custody argument. Property division favors client due to career interruption for childcare and documented financial contributions to household maintenance. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were building a legal case designed to paint me as a negligent mother who'd abandoned her family for career ambitions. Every business trip I had taken to advance our family's financial security was being reframed as evidence of my failure as a parent. The most chilling document was a timeline they'd created, outlining their strategy for the next 6 months. Phase 1, establish routine with children, document maternal role. Phase 2, legal consultation and evidence gathering. Phase 3, engagement announcement and cohabitation discussion. Phase 4, divorce filing with custody petition. Phase 5, property settlement and relocation. We were currently in Phase 3. The engagement ring in my pocket represented the transition to a phase where they would no longer hide their relationship, where Jasmine would move into our home openly, and where I would be presented with divorce papers that painted me as an absent mother who'd chosen career over family. But hidden in Dante's browser history, I found something that changed the entire game. Jasmine Torres wasn't just a pediatric nurse who'd fallen in love with a married doctor. She had her own complicated history that Dante apparently either didn't know about or was choosing to ignore.
Her social media presence, which I'd only superficially examined the night before, told a more complex story when I dug deeper. She'd been married before, to a man named Carlos Torres, and that marriage had ended messily just 2 years ago. Court records, publicly available through the county clerk's website, showed that she'd been accused of adultery during that marriage and that her ex-husband had successfully argued for an unequal asset division based on her infidelity. More interesting was her employment history. She'd worked at 3 different hospitals in the past 5 years, which seemed unusual for someone building a stable career in pediatric nursing. A deeper dive into professional licensing records showed 2 formal complaints filed against her during her tenure at Memorial Hospital in Springfield, both related to inappropriate relationships with colleagues and boundary violations with supervisors. Jasmine Torres had a pattern. She targeted married men in positions of authority within hospital settings, developed intimate relationships that destabilized their existing marriages, and then moved on when the situations became professionally or legally complicated. Dante wasn't her first victim. He probably wouldn't be her last. But most importantly, she'd been fired from Memorial Hospital for having an affair with a married department head, an affair that had resulted in his divorce and her professional censure. The hospital's HR records, which I accessed through a professional database my marketing firm subscribed to, showed that she'd been terminated for conduct unbecoming of healthcare professional standards, and that there had been serious discussion about reporting her behavior to the state nursing board. She'd been unemployed for 3 months before landing the position at Riverside Children's Hospital, the position where she'd met my husband and begun implementing the same pattern that had destroyed at least one other family before ours. As I sat in our home office at midnight, surrounded by printed emails and legal documents and evidence of a betrayal more systematic than I'd ever imagined possible, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting against a woman who made destroying families her specialty, and I now had the documentation to prove it. The question was no longer whether I could save my marriage. Clearly, that was already over. The question was whether I could protect my children from becoming collateral damage in Jasmine Torres's pattern of professional and personal destruction, and whether I could ensure that the next family she targeted would be warned about exactly what they were dealing with. By dawn, I had a plan that would accomplish both goals, and neither Dante nor Jasmine had any idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While Dante showered and got ready for work, humming the same tune he'd hummed every morning for 7 years, I lay in our bed making a mental checklist of everything I needed to accomplish before he realized his perfect plan was about to implode. First, I needed professional help. Not a therapist, though I'd probably need one eventually, but a lawyer. Someone who specialized in high-conflict divorce cases and understood how to combat the kind of systematic character assassination Dante and his legal team were preparing. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway, listened for the school bus to pick up Lily and Mason, and then called Fletcher and Associates to tell them I was taking a personal day. My assistant, Katie, didn't ask questions when I explained I had urgent family matters to handle. One of the benefits of being a dedicated employee for 8 years was that nobody questioned when you needed time for an emergency. At 9 a.m. sharp, I was sitting in the office of Margaret Kellerman, a family law attorney whose reputation for aggressive representation preceded her throughout the Chicago suburbs. I'd chosen her specifically because she'd been mentioned in several online forums as someone who didn't just handle divorce cases, she won them, especially when the opposing party thought they could manipulate the system. Margaret was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that made it clear she'd seen every variety of marital deception imaginable. I spread my printed evidence across her conference table like a detective presenting a case file. The engagement ring, bank statements, email correspondence, Jasmine's employment history, and the legal consultation records I discovered through a professional database my marketing firm subscribed to. Mrs. Rodriguez, Margaret said after reviewing everything for 20 minutes in complete silence, I've been practicing family law for 23 years, and this is one of the most
thoroughly documented cases of premeditated marital fraud I've ever seen. Marital fraud. The term gave legitimacy to what I'd been struggling to understand. This wasn't just adultery or even a typical divorce scenario. This was systematic deception with the specific intent to manipulate legal and financial outcomes. The good news is that your husband has been so confident in his strategy that he's documented everything. These emails constitute written evidence of concealment of assets, conspiracy to commit fraud, and deliberate misrepresentation of facts for legal advantage. In Illinois, this kind of behavior doesn't just affect property division, it can result in criminal charges.
She leaned forward, her expression shifting from professional assessment to something that looked almost predatory. The even better news is that Ms. Torres's employment history creates a pattern that we can use to demonstrate this was premeditated seduction with financial motivation. She's not just a woman who fell in love with a married man, she's someone who systematically targets married professionals in healthcare settings. What does that mean for my case? It means we're not just fighting a divorce, we're exposing a conspiracy to commit fraud, and we're doing it with documentation that your husband helpfully provided himself. Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a warm expression. How much time do we have before they realize you know? I'm not sure. Dante thinks I'm completely oblivious, but I found an engagement ring hidden in our closet, and I don't know when he's planning to propose to her officially. Then we need to move fast. I'm going to file a motion for exclusive use of the marital home based on evidence of asset concealment and fraud. We're also going to freeze all joint accounts and request a forensic accounting audit. Your husband won't be able to transfer another penny without court approval. The speed with which Margaret moved was terrifying and exhilarating. Within 3 hours, she'd filed preliminary motions, arranged for a private investigator to document Jasmine's current activities, and connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. But the most important call she made was to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, the agency that oversees nursing licenses. Jasmine's pattern of inappropriate workplace relationships, combined with her current violation of professional boundaries with a married colleague, constituted grounds for a formal investigation into her fitness to practice nursing. If she's terminated from Riverside Children's Hospital for professional misconduct, Margaret explained, she'll have difficulty finding employment anywhere in healthcare. Her entire motivation for targeting your husband, financial security through marriage to a successful physician, disappears if she can't work in her chosen field. By the time I left Margaret's office, I had a comprehensive strategy that addressed every aspect of Dante's plan while creating consequences he'd never anticipated. But more importantly, I had something I'd lost the night I discovered his betrayal: power. The private investigator, a former police detective named Ryan Walsh, met me at a coffee shop in downtown Willowbrook to discuss surveillance parameters. He was exactly what you'd expect from someone in his profession: unremarkable in appearance, forgettable in manner, the kind of person who could blend into any environment without attracting attention. I read the case file your attorney provided, Ryan said, stirring his coffee with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to details. This isn't my first rodeo with workplace affair situations, but the documentation you've gathered is exceptional. Most people discover infidelity and react emotionally. You've approached this like a research project. I'm a marketing director. Research is what I do. Good. That's going to serve you well. What I need from you is a schedule of your husband's routines, information about when and where they typically meet, and access to any additional communications you might discover. The more predictable their behavior, the easier it will be to document. Ryan explained that his primary goal was to establish a timeline of deception that would support Margaret's legal strategy. Photos of Dante and Jasmine together in romantic settings, documentation of her presence in our home during times when she was supposedly providing childcare, evidence of their public behavior as a couple while he was still married to me. I also want to document her interactions with your children, Ryan continued. If she's systematically undermining your parental relationship or encouraging them to prefer her over you, that constitutes parental alienation, which Illinois courts take very seriously.
The forensic accountant, Linda Chen, was a woman in her 40s who specialized in cases involving financial deception. Her analysis of our banking records revealed the full scope of Dante's preparation for divorce proceedings. Your husband has been very sophisticated in his approach, Linda explained, as she showed me spreadsheets and transaction analyses on her laptop. The transfers to his separate account were carefully timed to coincide with your business travel, and the amounts were kept small enough to avoid triggering automatic alerts. But over 6 months, he's moved approximately $23,000 from joint accounts. $23,000? The number was larger than I'd calculated. The jewelry purchases, restaurant charges, and hotel bookings were just the obvious expenses. He's also been making cash withdrawal that don't correspond to any documented household expenses, paying for services like legal consultations in cash to avoid creating paper trails, and purchasing items that appear to be related to setting up a separate residence. Linda's analysis suggested that Dante had been planning this divorce for nearly 8 months, since around the time I'd received my promotion and begun traveling more frequently. My career advancement hadn't been the catalyst for his affair. It had been the opportunity he'd been waiting for to implement a plan that was already in development. But the most empowering moment of that day came when I called Riverside Children's Hospital and requested to speak with Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of pediatrics, and Dante's direct supervisor.
I'd met Patricia several times at hospital functions and had always found her to be a woman who valued professionalism and ethical behavior above all else. She also had 3 children of her own and had once confided to me that she had zero tolerance for healthcare professionals who endangered family stability through workplace misconduct. Patricia, this is Camila Rodriguez, Dante's wife. I wonder if I could schedule a brief meeting with you to discuss a professional conduct matter that affects our hospital's reputation. Of course, Camila. Is everything all right? Is Dante in some kind of trouble? It's complicated, and I'd rather discuss it in person. Would tomorrow afternoon be possible? I have documentation that I think you'll find very concerning. Patricia agreed to meet me the following day at 3 p.m. in her office. I didn't elaborate on the nature of my concerns, but I could hear in her voice that she understood this wasn't a casual conversation. By Thursday evening, I had assembled a team of professionals who understood exactly what Dante and Jasmine had been planning and were prepared to systematically dismantle every aspect of their strategy. More importantly, I had transformed from a devastated wife discovering her husband's affair into a strategic opponent who held all the cards. Dante came home that evening with flowers, grocery store roses that cost $8 and probably represented an afterthought on his way home from work. He kissed my cheek with the same casual affection he'd shown for months, completely unaware that his wife now knew about his engagement ring, his secret bank account, his legal strategy, and his girlfriend's history of destroying marriages. "How was your day, beautiful?" he asked, hanging his coat in the closet where Jasmine's engagement ring was hidden behind my winter coats. "Very productive," I replied, accepting his flowers with a smile that felt genuinely warm for the first time in days. I accomplished more than I expected. As I arranged the roses in a vase, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken or devastated or consumed with betrayal. I was energized by the prospect of watching his carefully constructed plan collapse under the weight of his own arrogance and documentation. Tomorrow, Patricia Williams would learn that one of her pediatric physicians was engaged in a professionally inappropriate relationship with a nurse who had a documented history of such behavior. Margaret Kellerman would file motions that would freeze his ability to move any more money and establish legal grounds for his removal from our home. Linda Chen would present evidence of financial fraud to the court, and Ryan Walsh would begin documenting every moment of the affair that Dante thought was so carefully hidden. But tonight, I would sleep peacefully in our bed, knowing that I held his future in my hands the same way he thought he held mine. The difference was that I had earned my power through careful preparation and evidence gathering. He had simply assumed his deception was superior to my intelligence. Tomorrow, he would learn how wrong he had been. Friday afternoon, I sat in Dr. Patricia Williams' office watching her face change as she reviewed the documentation I'd brought. The engagement ring sat on her desk between us like a small glittering bomb. The employment records, the email correspondence, the pattern of Jasmine's previous terminations, all of it spread across Patricia's mahogany desk in neat, organized stacks. "This is extremely serious, Camilla," Patricia said finally, removing her reading glasses and rubbing her temples. "If even half of this is accurate, we have a significant professional conduct issue that extends far beyond a simple workplace romance." "It's all accurate," I replied, my voice steady, despite the magnitude of what I was revealing. "And there's more." I handed her the printed emails between Dante and Jasmine discussing their strategy for my divorce, including the references to using his position as primary childcare provider to gain custody. Patricia's expression grew darker with each page. "Dr. Rodriguez has been using his professional credibility to build a legal case based on deception," she said, more to herself than to me. "And Ms. Torres has been participating in the systematic undermining of a colleague's marriage while in a position of trust with that colleague's children. Patricia, I need you to know that I'm not asking you to fix my marriage. That's beyond repair. But I am asking you to consider whether this behavior reflects the professional standards Riverside Children's Hospital expects from its staff." She was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the timeline of Dante's calendar entries that corresponded with his meetings with Jasmine, the dates of the legal consultations, the progression of their relationship during work hours and on hospital property. "I'm going to need to conduct a formal investigation," Patricia said finally. "This kind of misconduct, using hospital resources and professional relationships to facilitate personal deception, violates multiple aspects of our ethics code. Both Dr. Rodriguez and Ms. Torres will need to be interviewed, and their access to patient care will be suspended pending the outcome." The words I'd been hoping to hear. Dante's plan required his professional reputation and income to work. If he was suspended from practicing medicine, if Jasmine lost her nursing position, their entire strategy for building a life together would collapse.
"There's something else," Patricia continued, her tone becoming more personal. "As someone who's known Dante professionally for 6 years, I'm genuinely shocked. He's always presented as a devoted family man, someone who prioritized work-life balance, specifically to be present for his children. To discover that this was all performance while he was actively planning to destabilize his family, it calls into question his judgment in ways that affect patient care." I left Patricia's office knowing that by Monday morning, Dante's professional world would begin unraveling in ways he couldn't anticipate or control. But the real confrontation was still waiting for me at home. Margaret Kellerman had called that morning to inform me that all the legal paperwork was ready to be served. The motion for exclusive use of our home, the asset freeze orders, the request for emergency custody evaluation, everything was prepared and could be filed within hours of my decision to proceed. "Once we serve these papers, there's no going back. Your husband will know that you're aware of everything, and his reaction may be unpredictable. Are you prepared for that confrontation?" I was. More than prepared. I was looking forward to it. The children were at their Friday afternoon activities, Lily at gymnastics, Mason at soccer practice, when I returned home. Dante's car was in the driveway, which meant he was home earlier than usual, probably planning to spend time with Jasmine while I was supposedly picking up the kids, not realizing that I'd arranged for my friend Sarah to handle pickup duties so I could orchestrate this confrontation on my terms. I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the low, intimate tone I now recognized as his voice for Jasmine. "I can't wait either, mi amor," he was saying. "Tomorrow night, when Camila takes the kids to her sister's house for the sleepover, we'll have the whole evening to celebrate properly. I've been carrying this ring around for weeks, and I'm ready to make it official." He was planning to propose to Jasmine in our home, in our bedroom, while our children were at a family sleepover I'd arranged weeks ago. The casual desecration of every boundary, every sacred space in our family life crystallized my resolve into something diamond hard. I walked into the room without knocking, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor with deliberate authority. Dante looked up, startled, and immediately ended his phone call with a hurried, "I'll call you back later." "Don't hang up on my account," I said, setting my purse down on our dresser with careful precision.
I'm sure Jasmine is excited about tomorrow night's proposal. The color drained from his face so completely that for a moment I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. I was wondering when you were going to mention your engagement. It seems like the kind of thing a husband should discuss with his wife. I set the ring box on the bed between us and watched him stare at it like it was a live grenade. Camila, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, very good at stories, very good at making people believe things that aren't true. I sat down in the reading chair, the one that had been moved closer to the bed for Jasmine's comfort, and crossed my legs. The lawyer confirmed that Illinois is an equitable distribution state, which means the House division will be based on contribution and need, rather than just splitting everything 50-50. I looked up at him. Would you like me to continue with your legal strategy email, or should we skip ahead to the part where you discuss how I'm a negligent mother who prioritizes career over family? Dante's face went from white to gray. When did I discover that my husband is engaged to another woman? When did I learn about the secret bank account with $23,000 that you've stolen from our joint finances? When did I find out that you've been systematically preparing to divorce me while letting me believe we had a happy marriage? I smiled, and it felt like showing teeth. Tuesday night, when I came home early from Denver and heard you planning my replacement in our bedroom. He tried to stand up, but I held up my hand in a gesture that stopped him cold. Sit down, Dante. We're not finished talking. Something in my voice, some authority he'd never heard before, made him sink back onto the bed. For the first time in our entire relationship, I was the one in control of the conversation. I know about Jasmine's employment history, the affairs, the terminations, the professional misconduct complaints. I know about your legal consultations and your timeline for destroying our family. I know about the engagement ring and the proposal plans and the strategy to paint me as an absent mother. I leaned forward slightly, holding his gaze. But here's what you don't know, Dante. You don't know what I've been doing since Tuesday night.
I pulled out a manila folder and began placing documents on the bed, one by one, like laying down cards in a poker game where I held all the aces. Margaret Kellerman is filing motions on Monday morning that will freeze every joint account, remove you from this house, and request emergency custody evaluation based on evidence of parental alienation and financial fraud. I placed another document. Ryan Walsh has been documenting your affair for 3 days, including photos of Jasmine entering our home while she was supposedly providing childcare for our children. Another document. Linda Chen's forensic accounting audit will demonstrate systematic asset concealment and theft of marital property, which in Illinois constitutes criminal fraud. Another. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation will be conducting an investigation into Jasmine's fitness to practice nursing based on her pattern of professional boundary violations. Dante was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Camila, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, but you don't understand yet. You don't understand that Dr. Patricia Williams suspended both you and Jasmine effective Monday morning pending a full investigation into professional misconduct. You don't understand that your colleagues will be informed that you've been using hospital resources and your position of trust to facilitate an extramarital affair with a subordinate. I stood up and walked to our bedroom window, looking out at the street where our children would return from their activities in an hour, completely unaware that their family was being systematically restructured around them. You don't understand that every email you've sent, every legal consultation you've attended, every dollar you've stolen from our family has been documented and will be presented in court as evidence of premeditated fraud. I turned back to face him, And you definitely don't understand that the woman you're planning to marry has done this exact thing to at least 2 other families before ours." The silence that followed was complete. Dante sat on our bed, surrounded by evidence of his own deception, staring at the engagement ring that would never be worn by the woman he'd planned to propose to tomorrow night. "The children," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "What about Lily and Mason?" "The children will be protected from the consequences of their father's choices. They'll have a stable home with their mother who never betrayed their trust or used them as pawns in a legal strategy designed to steal their inheritance." I walked back to the bed and picked up the engagement ring, holding it up to catch the afternoon light streaming through our bedroom window. "You have until Sunday night to move out of this house voluntarily, or the sheriff will serve papers and remove you Monday morning. You have until then to explain to our children why Daddy has to live somewhere else now in language that doesn't traumatize them or make them feel responsible for your choices." I dropped the ring back into its box and set it on his lap. "And you have until then to decide whether you want to try to salvage some small piece of your professional reputation by cooperating with the hospital's investigation, or whether you want to fight this and have every detail of your conduct made public during depositions." I picked up my purse and walked toward the bedroom door. Then I paused and turned back to face the man I'd married, the father of my children, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. "Oh, and Dante, when you call Jasmine to tell her that her plan to become Mrs. Rodriguez isn't going to work out, you might want to mention that she should start looking for employment outside healthcare. Her nursing license investigation will become public record, and no hospital will hire someone with her professional conduct history." I left him sitting on our bed, surrounded by the wreckage of the life he thought he was so cleverly stealing from me. The children would be home soon, and I had dinner to prepare. But for the first time in months, I was looking forward to our evening together. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of the house that was now legally mine, watching Lily and Mason eat breakfast at the island where Jasmine Torres had once sat helping with homework while plotting to replace their mother. The morning light streamed through windows I'd had professionally cleaned the day after Dante moved out, and everything felt brighter, cleaner, more honest than it had in years. The legal proceedings had unfolded exactly as Margaret Kellerman predicted. Dante's systematic documentation of his deception made the divorce settlement swift and decisive. The court awarded me primary custody, exclusive use of our home, and 65% of our assets, based on evidence of financial fraud and parental alienation. His attempt to paint me as a negligent mother had backfired spectacularly when presented alongside evidence that he'd been systematically undermining our family while stealing money to fund an affair. But the most satisfying outcome had nothing to do with legal victories or financial settlements. It was the quiet peace that filled our home now that it was no longer contaminated by deception. "Mommy, Mason, can we go to the park after breakfast? The one with the big slide?"
"Of course we can," I replied, refilling his orange juice glass. "Would you like to bring your soccer ball?" These small moments, the casual Saturday morning requests, the sticky fingers, the easy affection of children who felt secure in their home, had become precious in ways I'd never fully appreciated when I'd thought our family stability was guaranteed. Lily looked up from her cereal bowl, milk mustache making her look even younger than her 7 years. "Is Daddy coming to my recital next week?" This was the question I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Dante had been granted supervised visitation every other weekend, which meant the children saw him regularly, but in controlled environments that prevented him from continuing his pattern of manipulation and deception. "Daddy wants to come to your recital," I said carefully, "but he'll need to sit separately from us. Remember how we talked about how sometimes when grown-ups make mistakes, they have to follow special rules to keep everyone safe?" Lily nodded solemnly.
At 7, she didn't fully understand the complexities of what had happened to our family, but she understood that Daddy had been dishonest and that dishonesty had consequences. It was a lesson I hoped would serve her well throughout her life. The children had adjusted better than I dared to hope. Mason, always the more emotional of the twins, had cried for the first few weeks after Dante moved out. But children are remarkably adaptable when their primary caregiver remains stable and honest with them. I'd worked with a child psychologist to find age-appropriate ways to explain that Daddy had made choices that meant he couldn't live with us anymore, but that both parents loved them and would always be part of their lives. What surprised me was how quickly they stopped asking about Aunt Jasmine. Within a month of Dante's departure, neither child had mentioned her name. It suggested that their attachment to her had been more situational than genuine, more about her availability during my business trips than any deep emotional connection. This realization had been both relieving and heartbreaking. Relieving because it meant less emotional damage to process, heartbreaking because it revealed how easily children can be manipulated by adults they trust. My career had flourished in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant underlying stress of maintaining a marriage built on deception, I'd found new energy and focus for my work at Fletcher and Associates. The Meridian Health account I'd pursued in Denver had led to 3 additional pharmaceutical contracts, and I'd been promoted to senior vice president with a salary that easily supported our family's needs. More importantly, I'd learned to trust my own instincts again. The promotion came with increased responsibility, but also with better work-life balance. I traveled less frequently, delegated more effectively, and discovered that success didn't require the kind of personal sacrifice I'd thought was necessary when I'd been trying to build a life with someone who was actively undermining it. Fletcher and Associates had also been remarkably supportive throughout the divorce proceedings. When I'd needed to take time off for court appearances and legal meetings, my colleagues had stepped in seamlessly. When local news outlets had picked up the story about the hospital investigation into Dante and Jasmine's misconduct, my work family had rallied around me with the kind of professional solidarity that reminded me how valuable genuine loyalty could be. The story had indeed become public, though not in ways that damaged my reputation or the children's privacy. Riverside Children's Hospital had conducted their investigation with discretion, but the outcome had been decisive. Dante had been terminated for professional misconduct, and Jasmine had resigned before she could be fired. More significantly, the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation had suspended Jasmine's nursing license pending a full review of her professional conduct history. The last I'd heard, through the kind of professional gossip networks that exist in every industry, Jasmine had moved to Arizona and was working in medical billing rather than direct patient care. Her pattern of targeting married healthcare professionals had finally caught up with her in ways that would follow her across state lines and professional databases. Dante had found employment at a smaller clinic in a neighboring county, making significantly less money and working longer hours. His professional reputation in our community was damaged beyond repair, and his social connections had evaporated when the details of his deception became known. Mutual friends had been horrified to learn the extent of his systematic betrayal, and most had chosen to maintain relationships with me and the children rather than with him. But the most profound change wasn't in the external circumstances. It was in how I understood myself and my own worth. The woman who'd stood in that hotel room 6 months ago, devastated by the discovery of her husband's affair, had been someone who measured her value through other people's perceptions and needs. I'd been a devoted wife, dedicated mother, successful professional, but all of those identities had been defined in relation to other people's expectations. The woman I'd become was someone who understood that self-worth comes from internal integrity, not external validation. I'd learned that loyalty given to people who don't reciprocate it isn't virtue, it's self-destruction. I'd discovered that trust, once broken by systematic deception, doesn't have to be rebuilt, if the person who broke it hasn't fundamentally changed their character? Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to remove them from exposure to people who treat deception as an acceptable tool for getting what they want.
Mommy, you're smiling, Lily observed, interrupting my reflections. I am, I agreed. I'm happy. And it was true, not the desperate happiness of someone trying to convince herself that everything was fine, but the deep contentment of someone who'd fought for what mattered and won. After breakfast, as we got ready for our trip to the park, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I recognized but hadn't seen in years, someone with clear eyes, straight shoulders, and the kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever challenges life presents. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my friend who'd helped with child pickup during those crucial days of evidence gathering. Coffee next week? I want to hear about your date with that lawyer from the gym. I smiled and typed back, definitely. And it went very well. Thank you for asking. Dating hadn't been a priority during the legal proceedings, but lately I'd been open to meeting new people, not because I needed someone to complete me or validate my worth, but because I'd rediscovered that I enjoyed adult companionship and had a lot to offer someone who was capable of honesty and genuine partnership. The lawyer for my gym, Michael, was divorced himself and understood the complexities of building new relationships after betrayal. Our first coffee date had turned into a 3-hour conversation about everything from career ambitions to parenting philosophies to travel dreams. He'd been transparent about his own divorce, honest about his mistakes, and refreshingly direct about his intentions. Most importantly, he'd met my children in casual, pressure-free environments and had shown genuine interest in their thoughts and feelings rather than trying to win their affection through gifts or special treatment. Lily and Mason liked him, but they weren't being asked to replace their father or accelerate emotional attachments they weren't ready for. As we walked to Riverside Park, the children running ahead to claim their favorite swings, I realized that this was what happiness looked like after betrayal. Not the desperate joy of someone trying to prove they'd recovered, but the steady contentment of someone who'd learned to build a life based on truth rather than illusion. The playground was full of families enjoying the spring morning, couples pushing strollers, fathers teaching sons to throw baseballs, mothers braiding daughters' hair on park benches. 6 months ago, seeing these intact families would have made me ache with loss for what my children would never have again. Now, I saw them as representations of what was possible when people chose honesty, commitment, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Some of these families would face challenges, some might not survive, but all of them were at least trying to build something real together. My children would grow up understanding that real love requires truth, that commitment means choosing your family every day, and that trust is earned through consistent actions rather than empty promises. They'd learn these lessons through painful experience, but they'd learn them young enough to carry the knowledge into their own future relationships. As I pushed Mason on the swing and watched Lily master the monkey bars she'd been afraid to try just months earlier, I understood that this was victory, not the destruction of the people who'd betrayed us, but the construction of a life that no longer required their presence or approval to be complete. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well without the people who thought they were indispensable to your happiness. And sometimes the best lesson you can teach your children is that love without honesty isn't love at all. It's just convenient deception that eventually cost everyone involved far more than the truth ever could have. Walking home from the park that afternoon, holding hands with my children and planning our evening together, I realized I wouldn't change what had happened even if I could. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. It had taught me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, more resourceful than I'd ever tested,
and more deserving of genuine love than I'd ever demanded. And those were lessons worth learning, no matter how much they'd cost to acquire. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.